Harihi Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Krupatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om Sishyatma Samarpan Karpanya Dosho Upahata Swabhavaha Pritchami Tvam Dharma Sammuda Chetaha Yashreyasyan Nischitam Bruhi Tanme Shishyasteham Shadhimam Tvam Prapannam. Om. So, welcome to the class, and we are in the 21st shloka of Bhagavad Gita in the chapter number 2. And we completed this shloka in terms of the explanation as well as Bhashyam in terms of how Shankaracharya presented it. As I said, there are some traditions which conclude the Atma, the aspect of Atma at this shloka. So Shankaracharya has written a huge question and answer that clarifies and establishes the Advaita Darshana. Right? And it's a very elaborate and a big, beautiful question and answer session. It may go for a couple of weeks. But there are other traditions like the one that I come from. It is 25th shloka, and there are others as well who take it up to the 29th shloka. So they will say that, when they are summarizing, they will say that from shloka number 11 to shloka number 29 or 25 or 21 is about Atma, is the way that they present it. The shloka goes like this. Veda vinashinam nityam yayenamajamavyayam katham sah purushah partha kam ghatayati hantikam. So here the main establishment was to say that if a person has attained this knowledge about Atma, how is it that he can kill or have someone else to execute that particular action of killing? And Acharya had taken this to say that he is liberated from the bondage of karma, that he doesn't have to do anything, is the wrong way that people, interpret the statement. Right? It is the right way is to say that the karta bhavam, that I am the doer, will be lost. And hence, the karma, which is a prakritic nature, will continue to function, and I, as a subject, as the Chaitanyam, and as a Sad Swarupam, providing that ability of sustenance to this Prakritik Amsham, will continue to provide it. That is the core of understanding what is becoming an akarta, or what is meant by liberation from the karma anubandhan. Okay, the bondage of karma, getting liberated from that is to be interpreted in this manner. So Poorva Paksha asks the questions and Acharya provides the responses. The first question the Poorva Paksha asks is Vidushaha kam karma asambhave hetu vishesham pashyan karmani akshipati bhagavan katham sa purushaha iti. What is the specific hetu? What is the ground? What is the basic assumption, or what is it that we take as the basis for one to conclude that determining Bhagavan's words, Khatam Sat Purushaha, be equated to action not possible. Okay, so how is it that one can, what is the basis, right? You are saying that he is free of action. What is the basis for that? So Shankaracharya says that Nanu Ukta Eva Atmanaha Avikriyatvam Sarva Karma Asambhava Karana Visheshaha. So that is the place where he nails it. It's a very important statement, and hence I wanted to speak about it and also tell exactly the words. The soul's attribution of being changeless has already been established, which in itself is the base or the ground for all activities not being applicable to Atma. Okay? Not having an action is not the word that is used. All activities not being applicable to Atma. So, sarva karma asambhava karana visheshaha. Right? It is because the moment I become the subject, the subject has no action. The subject is changeless, omnipresent, omnipotent, and universal, singular in nature. And because of that, it is naturally established that once who has realized that I am the subject, the action which is associated with the object gets detached from me. So long as I am seeing myself as the object, the action is attached to me. And the moment I detach myself from the object and I become the pure subject, that subject has no action associated. That is the answer that Acharya gives. Very nuanced. It needs to be very carefully examined, analyzed, and thought through. We always come up with that Rajogun saying, I am the doer. As you move into the Sattva Gun, that I am the doer becoming an egoistic expression will change. And when you become a Gunathitaha, when you cross the boundaries of Gun, you become the pure subject. It doesn't mean the body will function on its own. The body has taken an ashraya in you. And that ashrayam you will continue to provide. That is why you will see that some of the Maharishis are having anger, but they are not touched by the anger. Right? Dhruva Rishi is told to be, one who is everybody is afraid of because of his temperament. The temperament is there in the body, but because the self, the aham has been realized, that bodily function has no impact on the subject. That is what we need to process in our mind. The Poorva Paksha continues. Yes, it is indeed said so. There is no doubts about it. There are very clear and direct statements. So yes, it is absolutely said so. However, from the avikriya atma, right? Vikriya is Kriya is action. Vikriya is special action, or the action which is associated with is the way that we should see it here. Avikriya is an action that has no association to the subject. However, from the avikriya atma, the changeless soul, the one who knows the atma is different. So these questions are kind of, very enlightening in nature. So what he's asking is, I know the Atma. Okay. Now, one who knows the Atma is different from the I. because knowledge becomes part of the object. As I told you, the objectified self and the subject needs to be understood clearly. And that is why he is pushing that question. So taking the above reference as a specific hetu is not suitable. This is because one who knows that sthanuhu, the pillar, is unchanging, does not have actions associated with him, is not possible. Do you understand the question? Question itself is very difficult to understand. So that is the difference that we have to create between the subject and the objectified subject. The question here that he is asking is, the subject, just because one knows that subject doesn't does not have actions associated with him, is not possible. I'll put it in a different context again. I have realized and I am the subject, but the person who has realized that I am the subject is Naresh. So this Naresh not being associated with action is not possible. Okay, agreed that the subject is not having the action. But isn't it not true that the objectified self is associated with the object? So if we put this as a doubt, what is your response? Here, the response from Acharya is, we will go into the English directly, big one. So, na vidushu atmavat na dehadi sangatasya vidvat is the way that it goes, but we will go into the way that Shankaracharya is putting it. Here, Acharya explores the relationship between Atma, the Vidwan, and Avidya or Vivekaha, and the concept of karma. So pay attention here. Atma, the person who knows the Atma, Vidwan, Avidya, the person who is ignorant of it, and Vivekaha, the discrimination, and the karma. Right? These are all the aspects that Acharya is going to speak here. It is rooted in Advaita Vedanta philosophy, focusing on the unchanging, unattached nature of the self and how ignorance clouds this understanding, leading to action prescription for those unaware of the self's true nature. So what Acharya is firstly saying is the basis of Advaita Darshana is the agyan, the not having an awareness about the subject being separate from the object and associating the I to the subject. This knowledge doesn't exist, right? Leading to actions or prescriptions for those who are unaware of the self's true nature. So actions are prescribed, even in the Veda, for those who are unaware of this. Therefore, by the process of elimination, right, parisheshanam we say, right, where it is elimination that is done, the self, Atma, is understood to be unattached and unchanging. Hence, the moment a person has realized that I am different from that which is objectified, that realization, as soon as one attains, the karma becomes impossible. leading to the justified objection, how is that person? Okay, he's going back to Bhagavad Gita here. Right, Katams of Purusha. Right, is the way that, Kam Ghatayeti Hantikam. That place, here he comes down to that quote from Bhagavad Gita and establishes that how is that person is in itself eliminating the possibility of one who has realized cannot be attached to the karma. Okay. There will be karma that this objectified Naresh will perform. I am now teaching, right? It doesn't mean that, what do you say, the person assuming that I have realized, which is not true, but assuming that I have come to that point of self-realization. When you attain that aspect of self-realization, the objectified self will lose its value. And thereafter, it will be more of a witness and support role that the self plays, not the drive of I am the doer. When that I am the doer is gone, the karma becomes impossible. Right? So, not affected by actions or changes in the external world. For wise person who know the self as distinct from the body, mind, action, body and mind, action becomes irrelevant because action belongs to the body, mind, and not to the self. This raises the question, how does such a person live or act in the world? As the wise are seemingly disconnected from the usual motivation for action. We will speak about it even more in the Bhagavad Gita as we go, right? Where the revelation will come in terms of how a person becomes totally actionless. The action is performed, but the person is actionless. We will talk about it when we get to those sections. But here, Acharya says, the self, like the intellect, is inherently unchanging, avikriya. Due to avidya, ignorance, people fail to distinguish the self from the mental modifications of the intellect. This ignorance leads to the superimposition, kalpana is the word that he is using, of changeability on the self. Just as sensory inputs are mistakenly attributed to the intellect. This is a very, very important word here. Here, Shankaracharya establishes that we do mistakenly attribute the sensory input to our intellect. Today, if you're going to talk about the peace deal that has happened between in Gaza and Israel, and the way that it is all developing, I have a knowledge of it. And the moment I put the knowledge of it, we are mistakenly attributing the self to that intellect, to the Chaitanyam which is enabling it. And that error is the avidya. It doesn't mean I do not know. It means that I, the subject, has enabled the object called as Naresh to know about this. This will be the realization which will drive the life of a Vidwan. So that is the very big subtle difference that we have to put and digest it within ourselves. Through Viveka Gyan, which is discrimination between self and non-self, the wise will realize that the self is distinct from mental modifications and sensory inputs. Even knowledge, vidya, obtained through the mental process is asatya rupam, because it depends on the intellect, which is part of the non-self. The self in its true essence is avikriya and beyond all the modifications, and this realization defines the Vidwan. Okay. The biggest problem that we will encounter as we continue in this journey is we will understand that I and you, or I and the objectified Naresh, are two different. And the role of I as a subject and Naresh as an object is very different. Naresh as an object is amsham of the Prakriti, and this Prakriti is karma sambhavam. It is always continuing to work. And I as a subject, I am not. This will remove the association of yourself from the action. And that is what he says, that a Vidwan, one who has realized that the subject is beyond all these modifications that the Prakriti goes through, will be liberated from the karma. There is no possibility of any binding that happens between the subject and the object. It is only when you slip into becoming an object, you start experiencing the difficulties or the samsara. The situations are not going to change. It is going to be the same. But your acceptance and your attitude towards that will totally change. Because the aham will continue to bless that enlightenment to the body, to the object called as Naresh. So there is a big shift in your perspective that will take place. Is the basic way in which we in our tradition understand these words. The passage Vidushaha Karma Asambhava Vachanat, etc. This passage articulates the key concepts of Advaita Vedanta. The self, Atma, is unchanging, unattached, and distinct from the body, which is anatma. Ignorance, which is avidya, leading to the misidentification of the self with the non-self. That is the biggest of the problem. That is the avidya that Shankaracharya speaks about. Discrimination is viveka reveals the self's true nature, freeing the wise from the need for action. Actions prescribed in scriptures are only for those who are unwise, who still identify with the body and mind. In a sense, the wise live as witnesses, unattached to the actions and their outcomes, while the unwise will engage in actions due to ignorance of their true nature. A very important but a very difficult concept, and that is why I have taken time in this. There is a lot of repetition that would have occurred, and as I said, we are coming towards the closure of this most difficult path, right? But it is important that we put our base on that. You can look at it from a Dvaita point of view, or Dvaitic point of view, or from a Visishtadvaitic point of view, but the base will remain the same. Where you put the association may change, but the truth that this I or this Atman is changeless will remain the same. And that you can yourself realize when you differentiate between the subject and the object. And that is why we are going into this so in such a repetitive manner. Now Poorva Paksha asks, this passage is a rhetorical observation or an argument regarding the prescription of knowledge, vidya, and actions, karma. It states knowledge is prescribed only for the ignorant, not for those who already possess it. Right? Those who are enlightened, it is not applicable to. Prescribing knowledge to someone who already knows it as is a pointless as grinding what is already ground, which has already been grinded. Thus enjoining knowledge which is not needed serves no purpose. Anarthakyat. Consequently, actions that are prescribed in the scriptures, we are specifically talking about Veda because Veda is taken as a praman, right? Scriptures for the ignorant who have not yet attained the spiritual wisdom or self-realization. For the wise who are beyond ignorance, actions become irrelevant. This is the tricky question. The question that he is asking is, you have taken Veda as a praman. If you are a realized person, then the Veda will lose its pramanitvam. It will not become a praman to you because you are saying that this is, what do you say, of no use. Means this is already known. So if we agree to the observation from Poorva Paksha, it would mean that Veda is meaningless. And if it is meaningless, we cannot attribute the position of a praman, the means of providing a knowledge, to Veda. That is the kind of a question that Poorva Paksha is asking. In other words, Poorva Paksha is agreeing to what you have said, but then he is questioning your reverence to Veda. In other words, the whole darshana will fail if it is not properly answered. So Acharya says, no, that is not the case. We'll go into the English directly. The response explains why knowledge of rituals like Agnihotra must be properly understood and practiced only when relevant. Irrelevance of knowledge for the wise is not applicable to what has been said there. Actions or the duties that are not required to be performed no longer have a relevance. There is no distinction between existence, which is bhavam, and non-existence, abhavam, of the action for someone who has transcended ignorance. For the wise, actions prescribed in the scriptures become irrelevant because they are grounded in the realization of the self, which is beyond action. Role of knowledge in the context of rituals is the only thing that is applicable here. In the case of Agnihotra and other similar rituals, knowledge of their purpose, Vishaya Artham, is important for the unwise to engage with these practices. Such knowledge guides them to perform actions like those rituals prescribed as a means for purification and what do you say, for the purpose of purification. Basically, the way that it is said is all the puja and everything that we do is for the inner purification so that we become eligible to understand about the Atma. There will be another beautiful shloka that we will come in the second chapter itself, where Bhagavan will say, Yavanartha udapane sarvata samplutodake. Right, everywhere it is surrounded by water. What is the purpose of a well? That will be the, what is a value of Veda once he has understood the Brahman, is the way that Bhagavan will himself say. So that is what he is leading to in this place. Actions are context specific and become irrelevant at a later time. Right? Uttarakalam is the word that he uses. Once their necessity has passed, for example, Agnihotra is a means to an end, and its performance ceases when higher knowledge is attained. This aligns with Advaita Vedanta, where rituals and prescribed duties are tools for those in ignorance. For the enlightened, who realize the self is unchanging and actionless nature, these rituals have no relevance. Actions culminate in knowledge, and once knowledge arises, the actions prescribed earlier lose their significance. This answer is a very beautiful one because Shankaracharya establishes that the purpose of the Veda is to elevate you, not hold you back. It provides the knowledge, and once you have attained that knowledge, you elevate yourself and let go of it. Right? The ultimate Vedantic, the end of Veda, is all about the Upanishads, which bring about this realization of self, aham. When once that is realized, everything else loses its significance. A beautiful answer to say that, hey, you cannot say Veda is not a Praman. Veda would have lost some of its utility for those who have crossed a specific boundary, is the way that Shankaracharya has responded. Right. He continues, Anushteyam karta aham mama kartavyam iti eva prakara avijnanavatah is the way that he continues. Actions for the ignorant. For the ignorant, the avidishuhu, action is necessary because they identify with the body-mind complex aspect and believe I am the doer. This is my duty. It is something that I have to do. Mama kartavyam. This identification arises from the lack of knowledge of the I, of the subject. For such people, the prescribed actions are a natural outcome. However, actions are not necessary for the wise. For one who has realized the self's nature, as described in this text, that it is not born, actions are no longer necessary. Such a person understands the self, Atma, as eternal, changeless, and actionless, beyond all notions of duty or obligation. All these are written by Shankaracharya in his Bhashyam. So he has been performing actions. It is not that he has not been performing actions. There are several things that you go into the mutt, even today, they perform. But the I am the performer is not behind it. That is what needs to be kept in mind. The realization of the true nature of the self, Atma Swarupam, happens through the knowledge, which is the Atma Gyan. Once the knowledge is attained, that is Uttarakale, there remains nothing to be done. Actions lose their purpose because the individual no longer identifies himself with the body. Action is only required for the body. So long as your ashraya is there in the body, this body has to perform the action. But I am not performing the action. So actions are prescribed only for those. Actions are prescribed only for those bound by ignorance. For the enlightened, who know their true nature as eternal and unchanging, no action is required. Basically, this passage reinforces the idea that action is tied to ignorance. As long as one identifies oneself with the body, the mind, when I say body, it includes all the three, right? Stula, Sukshma, Karana, Sharir. Actions are inevitable. So as long as one identifies with the Sharir, actions are inevitable. And once the self-knowledge is appearing, is arising in you, the need for action dissolves. As the realized person, one will understand their true nature as actionless and eternal. Okay, so that is the way that Acharya gives the clarification. Kintu, but, or though, however, through the realization of the oneness of the self. This is also very, very important. Atma ekatva and its true nature. One understands that I am not the doer, na aham karta. The self does not perform the action. I am not the experiencer, na bhokta. The self does not partake in or experiences the results of the action. Okay, so that is the separation that should come in you. You cannot be selective about it. That which gives me pleasure, I am absolutely enjoying it. That which is something not so pleasurable or it's painful, then I resist. These kind of things are telling that I am still bound to the body. So we should overcome that as soon as we start associating ourselves to the subject. And as a subject, remember, you are providing the ashrayam for the body. We spoke about it as to how we can think in terms of how the jivan came about. Like Shambhaya had earlier asked about how is it or what is the purpose of the birth? When Chaitanyam is one, why is it that there is a separation that is happening? How is it that the avidya is possible if there is Chaitanyam? Those were the kind of questions, and we saw how and what exactly happens. That attachment to the object is the reason for discrimination, and that discrimination is the one which leads us into the path of samsara and the cycle of birth and death. Once this, okay, the unique distinction is justified, upapadyate, because the knowledge of the self is complete and self-sufficient. It ends all ignorance, leaving no scope for any other pursuit. Self-knowledge is the highest and final realization, revealing the self as free from action, duality, and doership. It removes ignorance entirely, leaving nothing more to be known or sought. This knowledge transforms the seeker's understanding, rendering actions and worldly pursuits unnecessary. This is a little difficult concept to digest. Does it mean that a person who has attained the self-realization will not do anything? He will not have, what do you say, he will sit in the mountain top and grow his beard or something like that? No, not at all. We will come across those kind of clarifications too subsequently when Bhagavan gives the example of Janak Maharaj, etc. The thing is, this knowledge transforms the seeker's understanding, of the situation. And that change in the understanding will render that in that subject, that I, to become free of actions or any worldly pursuits. You will continue to support the Prakritic nature, which is evolution. And that is where we inject the Kshetra Paripalana, about which we will speak on some other time. But that is the place where we have to understand the difference between me being the doer and me being the non-doer, while this body will always be a doer. Right? So the binding to the body is what gets released. That is what is indicated in this section of the Bhagavad Gita. Going back, so Acharya continues, one who again thinks that I am the doer, karta aham. For such a person, the idea arises that this is my duty, mama idam kartavyam. Because of this conviction of must do, he becomes eligible, right, adhikriyate, for karma actions. Therefore, the karma binds them. Such a person is called as a vidwan, an ignorant person, as indicated by Bhagavad Gita 5:17. Both the one who thinks he acts and the one who thinks he makes others act do not know, is the way that Shloka goes. How can such a realized person act? He quotes this and asks it as a question. Therefore, the one who has realized the actionless self, avikriya atma, one who is wise, vidushaha, and desires liberation, the mumukshuhu, has a right only to renounce all karma, sarva karma sannyasa. Right? So he very clearly establishes it here. It doesn't mean you don't do any karma at all. It doesn't mean you become idle, you become like a statue. You are a statue is the realization that you will have. And this body, which I have been thinking I am I, or as I, becomes the one who is the doer. Thus, Lord Narayana in the Gita divides the people into two groups. Samkhya, the wise one, fit for Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yogis, fit for Karma Yoga, the path of action. It comes in the 3rd chapter. Right, so it comes Jnana Yogena, Sankhyanam, Karma Yogena, Yoginam. So, Tathacha Putraya Aha Bhagavan Vyasaha. So, he is now quoting from Vyas Bhagavan's words in Mahabharata, Shaka 2416. Right. There are two quotes that Acharya has provided. The source is not provided in the Bhashyam, but we know that it is coming from Ishavasya Upanishad when he is giving those two quotes. The first quote is from Mahabharata. Now, the one that I have referenced, that the one that I have studied, it comes in 12 in the Shanti Parva, 233.6. But Acharya would have given it as 241.6. It could be a different version of the book. Right. So I went into that actual shloka and I'm just presenting it here. The 12 indicates Shanti Parva, which has 353 chapters, and in the 233rd chapter, in the 6th shloka, right, this one is coming. is the reference that we have from Acharya. Though Acharya has said it is 241.6, it is actually 233.6 in the book that I have. I'm not saying Acharya is wrong. Acharya has misquoted. But if you look at the Bhashyam, it will say 241.6. But if you refer to the recent, more prominent published books, you will see it is coming in the 233rd shloka. For the reference purposes, I have quoted both the 233rd as well as the 241.6 that Acharya has quoted. Now, I don't want to really get into this. This is, I don't know if I have gotten into it, but yeah. So yeah, I think we should just let go of this. This is for your reference. You feel free to refer to it and take a look at it. And if you want to understand and make a relation, it will be great. So basically, for having concluded so, Shankaracharya, in his Bhashyam, has gone into Mahabharata and given a quote, and gone into Ishavasya and given a quote. And that is what I have produced it here. In terms of the the quote 2, this is coming from Ishavasya Upanishad, but not directly an Upanishadic mantra. It is Bhashyam to Ishavasya Upanishad of the first mantra. Right? The first mantra is Ishavasya sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat is the way that it goes. Many people even chant it. Tena tyaktena bhunjitaha in the second verse. Tena is for that reason, tyaktena, through the act of renunciation, bhunjitaha, protect yourself. Kriyapataschaiva, application of remedies in the preceding part, which is purastat. After that, sannyasascha, take up the renunciation. Right. So it is in the Bhashyam there, Acharya establishes as to why the tena tyaktena bhunjitaha. Why is it that the mantra says you will have to let go of this to protect yourself? What is the meaning of that? And that is what is provided in that place. The concept is the introduction of pravritti and nivritti lakshana, which Acharya quotes here as a reference from the established text. Okay, pravritti lakshana is, we have seen it in the beginning, in the introduction itself, right, where progressive path and renunciation path. That is what he is trying to bring it here and put it together. As I said, most of the people will try to understand what is there in Bhagavad Gita, and they may see this as not to be very relevant, but getting these quotes and perhaps investing some time in even understanding it and creating those references will help you in the path of this quote unquote liberation, which enlightens you, which brings about that brightness, that tejas in you, which will naturally come as a result of learning this Shastra. Now, chapter 3, Shloka 27. That is something that was quoted. Again, the shloka is Prakritehe kriyamanani gunaihi karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudhatma kartahamiti manyate. He even scolds the people. Ahankara vimudhatma, with that particular I being this. And what kind of a person? Vimudah, right, which is utter foolish, is the word that Shankara, that Bhagwan says in Gita. Right, in the 29th, in the 28th shloka, he says, Tattva vittu mahabaho guna karma vibhagayoho guna guneshu vartante iti matva na sajjate. One of the most important shloka. We will get to it when we are in the third chapter, but here it is guna guneshu vartanta, means it is only the guns that are interacting with each other. Iti matva, realizing it, having understood that, na sajjate. They are not moved. Right? They are absolutely in the bliss of the supreme happiness, because they realize that everything that is happening is merely a transaction between the various guns. It is me who is putting the body through ajnan. When you kind of lift up yourself and look at it in a bigger picture, you will see that which you put a value on is insignificant in terms of a change. And because of the Atma Gyan, you are always in the wholesome of the Prakriti. So the minor changes that you see is not something that is affecting at all. They are changes which are natural in accordance with the vidhan, with the rules of karma. The chapter 5, Shloka 13 that Shankaracharya quotes is Sarva Karmani Manasa Sanyasyaste Sukham Vashi. Very important shloka again here. Sarva Karmani Manasa Sanyasaha. That is the most important thing. From the mind, it is let gone. What does the mind do? Mind is trying to attach itself to that action that is taking place. For you to be in the state of happiness, it is important that this association to the karma must be let gone. And when you do that, Navadvare Pure Dehi Naiva Kurvanna Karayan. So he becomes a non-doer. Very clearly, Bhagavan's own words are there that establishes what Shankaracharya has said. So it is not like Shankaracharya is having a philosophy in the mind and is expressing, but he is giving the basis for such an understanding. Now, some people think you can never truly know the self as actionless, because every time I see the self gets objectified. Right? You cannot define it also. Right? The way that Bhagavad Gita will also say later is the intelligence lies in being able to objectify and remove the object, or realize that what you have got is actually an object about the subject. That is the way that you can make this body to learn. Realization is I becoming the subject that I truly am. So this explanation that you have given, maybe you can also think the same thing, that it is not possible. You can never truly know the self as actionless. They say, therefore, that sannyasa, renunciation, is meaningless. It is, he is himself questioning and answering. The reply is, if you say knowledge is impossible, then Upanishad teachings like self is unborn would become useless. You remember the Poorva Paksha started challenging the authority of Veda. So he is now, what do you say, coming back to that to respond to it, saying that you talk about the Karma Kanda and saying that Veda becomes meaningless. And if you say that this kind of realization is not possible at all, then the teachings in the Upanishads become useless. You are also one who puts trust in the Veda. I am also one who puts the trust in Veda. Right? If you put your line of argument, then this side of Veda will become useless. If I accept what you have said, this side of Veda will become useless. In this context, to understand that the purpose of the Veda is to elevate, and as you go up, that which you have learned will not be applicable to you, but it doesn't go useless. That is the way that Shankaracharya is building a response, an answer. Vedanta stands on the faith that self-knowledge is possible. It may be rare, but it is definitely possible. This is one of the responses. But in our tradition, we say that is the only purpose of every living being. And that is why they have to go through the cycle of birth and death to eventually come to a point where they go into this realization. We will talk about the benefits of starting it now so that we will see why it has to be done as soon as you can. We saw a story when we began about the king who is building another empire and moving on. The other one is where we will be talking about in Bhagavad Gita itself. Right, so we will definitely look into why it is possible. Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidenam, ascharyavat vadati tadaiva chanyah. Nowhere Bhagavan says that it is not possible. Bhagavan still establishes that it is possible. So it may be rare, which is what Bhagavan says. And Acharya also agrees here, and we all agree it, but it is really possible. And do it now, not later. In the 6th chapter, we will see that if you do it now, what is the benefit and how Bhagavan will guide you in terms of taking you further in the path of moksha. The self is beyond birth, beyond change, is non-doer and one without a second. But such knowledge cannot arise for everyone. And even if it were to arise, the renunciation of all actions would be instructed. However, if we accept their view, then the scriptural statements like the self is never born nor does it die would become meaningless. So this is another very subtle thing. If renunciation of all actions will be instructed, right? Let me read the Sanskrit part of it. Ekah aham atma iti na kaschid jnanam upapadyate yasmin sati sarva karma sannyasa upadishyate na jayate ityadi. Okay. Sarva karma sannyasa has been taught because of this. Right? Because of this nature of Atma. Na jayate ityadi shastra upadesha anarthakyat. So he says that na jayate briyate va kadachit etc. Ityadi shastra upadesha anarthakyat. If it will become totally useless for whatever even Bhagavan has said, is the way that Acharya presents it here. Time is 7:30. We will take a break in this slide and we will continue the Q&A. But as I said, this is going to be a long Q&A, and in tradition we say that it is because Acharya understood that here Bhagavan has directly jumped into a context or a concept which is very difficult to understand. It can be misleading at times, and it can also make you go on the wrong path in terms of understanding or establishing. For example, Advaita, right? If you establish it as a specific practice, Advaita becomes nothing different than Dvaita or Visishta Advaita. If you understand Advaita not as a written philosophy, then you will realize that it is the state of achieving or being in this beautiful definition that Bhagavan has given. So at this place, we will take a break. Harihi Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.